Welcome to episode 24 of the Sports Geek podcast. On today's episode, we talk content with Richard Clark from the Arsenal Media Group, and we sit down with Matthew Jepp from the West Coast Eagles to talk digital and fan engagement.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who introduced Twitter to Australia, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. And yes, I remember Twitter Brekkie, as it was known on Twitter, quite fondly, running a couple of events at Etihad Stadium and at the SCG, where we helped Twitter introduce themselves to the Australian market and the sports entertainment market. So that was a fun couple of events, and I'll link to the show notes back to those events. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek. Hopefully after 24 episodes you do know that. Thank you again for downloading and listening to the podcast. We recently reached the 7,500 downloads milestone, so very proud of what we've done so far and looking forward to producing more content for you guys in the sports digital space to help you do what you do best. On today's episode, I'm lucky enough to chat to Richard Clark, the managing editor for the Arsenal Media Group, and specifically talking about content and what they produce for Arsenal fans. And then recently I was over in Perth talking strategy and planning for next season with the West Coast Eagles. So I sat down with Matthew Jepp and talked about what they do from a point of view of digital, social and fan engagement. And later in the podcast, a new segment for the Sports Geek podcast.
Grandstand Breakfast on Grandstand Digital. Welcome to the microphone, the Sports Geek himself from Sports Geek HQ, Sean Callanan. G'day, Sean. How you going?
I'm good, thanks, Francis. And yourself?
Not too bad. Even better if we turn your mic on, I reckon.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. How's your week been?
It's been pretty good. Spent some time over in Perth with the West Coast Eagles and working with the different time zones. But it's been a fun week.
It's been interesting as a baseball fan, as you know, Red Sox fan, watching the World Series roll through the last few games and just seeing some diagnostics, as they call it in the industry, on the World Series on social media and just the level that it reached. It's a great game for it because you've got the time to indulge in the second screen experience.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also just the fact that the amount of, the initial reaction, and then there's a classic photo that people are sort of showing the growth of social media, and they've been using the Pope's inauguration. 5 or 6 years ago, there's one person with a phone, and the last one, everyone had a phone. And that's what I saw at the Boston Red Sox. Like the Major League Baseball shared a vine in the stands, and there was everyone was jumping up and down, but they're all jumping down with their phones out. So the amount of content that was being pumped out of Fenway from that first-person experience, and you as a mad Red Sox fan gets to take in that experience. And even talking to Peter Stringer at the Boston Celtics, he was remembering 2008 as a Celtics fan, but just the amount of content that's getting shared from even that short period of time from the fans' point of view, it just makes everyone feel a little bit closer.
Just with the way that it's presented, though, sport to sport, there seems to be a pattern of genericism coming through in that we've seen now Major League Baseball has a template for sharing content across all the franchises, and it's great. It's accessible, it's quick, it's incredibly tactile, so you can use it really simply, but it looks very similar. And now we're seeing that with the AFL doing the same thing. They haven't come up with an AFL app quite the same depth to it because it's not tricked up quite the same way, but it feels the same way. So the media's gone in-house and they're now providing their own content to their fans, bypassing traditional media.
Yeah, so, the Major League Baseball model is one that's trying to be replicated. So that's Major League Baseball Advanced Media. They're the tech company behind Major League at Bat, and they produce a lot of the content for a lot of the teams. So that's why you see a little bit of the sameness. It provides a shared services model, and we're seeing leagues sort of follow that. The NBA has something similar in that all the sites are the same, and AFL is following the same path. Cricket's sort of starting to set up that same sort of department. It's a model that allows you to provide a league-wide system and a certain level of service. Whereas if you look in the UK and Europe and the big football powerhouses, they're all their own media organisations in their own right, in that they've set up their own website, they've got their own TV channels and producing absolute mountains of content, but without the restrictions of it's got to be in this framework, it's got to be in this style website, or it's all got to be in the same style app. So there's a lot more flexibility that the football teams in UK and Europe have.
And they can control their own editorial direction.
Well, yeah, exactly, and they get to tell their own story and produce content that's specific to their fans and customise it however they want.
With that, though, I mean, it probably does create, I guess, two-tiered or haves and have-nots. Clubs that can do it and clubs that can't. Who are the biggest ones currently in the world who are making the most of social media as a way to reach out, particularly with those with global branding?
Well, From a UK football point of view, and I think we've got Richard Clark on the line.
We're trying to get hold of him.
We're trying to get as we speak, so he should be answering the phone. I think he's just putting the kids to bed. But Arsenal do a great job, and I don't need to tell you that.
A member and a subscriber to the Arsenal Player, so I use it, as a first point of call a lot of the time when it comes to information on the club.
So they've got from a digital point of view, they've got a digital membership and they've got a bunch of programming that is specific to the Arsenal fan, whether it be around match day with previews and highlights to then location specific content to setting up country specific pages from a social media point of view to reach out to those fans.
So they do it literally region by region?
They do, and that's what it does offer them. But the thing is that where it is different is that they've got a whole content strategy about, well, we've got to deliver to our fans, and the idea is to build that relationship with your fans so you can upscale them and sell merchandise and all that kind of thing. The commercialisation comes after it, but they're just producing absolutely awesome content, and the fact that they've got that platform with the Arsenal Player. If you haven't signed up and have a look at it, I know you every time I come in here you're showing me off different things, and I was actually showing the guys at West Coast. They had a slow motion recap of the game, and it was very British. It had a bit of dubstep happening behind the scenes.
And that was the Arsenal-Tottenham game from early in the season, wasn't it? Yeah, it was an 8-minute mini film that took you from walking through the front door with the players into the change room, out on the pitch, ground level footage of the game itself, which was different to what would have been the ball-by-ball description of the match, and it gave you a sense of being in the stadium. It was a really nice, concise, and as a fan, totally captivating vision. If you can never get to the Emirates Stadium, at least you felt like you were there. It was a really smart move. Yeah,
and so the difference is unlike other, I guess, teams, if we look at the NBA and Major League Baseball and AFL and like that, a lot of that is getting cut from the vision that the broadcasters are doing, whereas, Arsenal have got their own entity, their own cameraman. You're getting a completely different perspective.
They also provide their own in-house commentary too, so you can listen to the Arsenal call of the game with an Arsenal perspective without it being a cheer squad, which is important too. Richard Clark's the managing editor at Arsenal Media Group in London there at Highbury House, and he joins us here on Grandstand Breakfast Around Australia this morning. G'day, Richard. How are you going?
I'm very well. How are you?
Really well. Just quickly, we were talking about the film as an example that the team there at Arsenal Media made around the Tottenham Hotspur derby, the North London derby earlier this year, as an example of house-made or bespoke media content for the website. Tell us about putting that together, because it looked like an enormous amount of resources went into that.
There were a lot of resources go into it. We have an international television show. It goes out to 100 countries, 26 broadcasters take that. And that was part of that. It was actually built, it was produced for that. But we produced a different cut which went on the website, a slightly more extended cut. So resources were thrown into it. We had maybe 3 or 4 people working on it, 2 cameramen, 2 producers, but we have a huge team on a match day because we're doing content across all of our media, really, from print through to TV, social media, digital, everything. So everyone chips in on that particular piece.
So Richard, just from an overall content strategy point of view, what's your key driver for running your department? What are you trying to get out of everything that you're delivering over all the platforms?
We're trying to reach and engage with Arsenal fans all over the world. Fortunately, we've got one of the most historic football clubs to work with in arguably the most global sporting league in the world. And that's a wonderful asset to have. I'm an Arsenal fan. I grew up an Arsenal fan. I love the club, and I see my job as trying to create Arsenal fans around the world, all over the world, and to give them that love of the club that I grew up with.
And doing that, I guess there are different expectations both across borders and culturally, and that must be difficult to manage sometimes because you're not speaking to a homogenous audience at all.
Do you know what? I'm not sure I agree with that because I've been all over the world watching Arsenal and covering Arsenal and working for Arsenal. And whether I've been to China or whether I've been to the USA or whether I've been to wherever, if you go in a bar and watch Arsenal play, what you will see is fans, tens of fans, hundreds of fans, depending on where you are. They will be wearing Arsenal shirts and they will be singing exactly the songs that you see in the stadium and here in the stadium because they are aspirant, in my opinion, to the fans within the stadium. So I'm actually trying to appeal to them in the same way because those fans around the world, when they go into the bar, they are trying to be those fans in the stadium, be as close as they can, dress the same way, talk the same way, discuss the same things, chant the same songs, and that makes it a little bit easier than you would expect.
You've obviously been around my local on a Saturday night when I've been in there.
So Rich, what are some of the content types and I guess segments that are really hitting the mark for Arsenal fans?
Well, we have something called our Twitter takeover, which is something that we've developed ourselves, or at least twisted our own way, shall we say. And that is, we have an hour with where we say we're going to do this Twitter takeover, and we're going to have 6 players coming in to see us, and we will not give you notice of who it is, but we'll tell you, say, for example, it's Thursday morning, 10 to 11. So just before the first guy comes in, we'll say, okay, it's Olivier Giroud, get your questions in now. It's an immediate thing. It's a rush. It's a buzz. We stick up a hashtag, Ask Giroud. We do a little divine on the way in just to give them that little bit more of a close-up experience. He does his 10 minutes of Q&A with the fans, and we'll say, okay, this guy is Santi Cazorla, and the hashtag is Ask Cazorla. Bit of Vine there, in he goes. That has been a fantastic driver for us. The fans absolutely love that, and we've managed to have that hashtag Ask Giroud, Ask Cazorla, or whatever it may be. Very often that's trending number one globally, so that's probably our standout social media piece of content at the moment.
Well, you must be doing something right. I think you're about to tick over 3 million Twitter followers, which would put you at the fifth biggest football or sports team in the world.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be we've pretty much unbroken. We've been the biggest Premier League team on Twitter, and we are very, very close, about 8,000 away, I think, as I speak at the moment, from 3 million. And, we'd be the 5th biggest sports team in the world. That's a big thing for us. And we know that we need to grow and develop that particular presence because it's obviously social media is the easiest way to talk to your fans, directly to your fans, engage with your fans. And we need to get a bit more sophisticated. We need to do more. I'm not satisfied with that 3 million figure. I want to grow it and develop and, as I say, create those Arsenal fans around the world. That's really what I see my job to be. Richard
Clark's with us, Managing Editor at Arsenal Media Group in London. Richard, what about the buy-in? I mean, you need the buy-in from the coach and from the players. Do they get it? And is it hard to have them? There's so many demands on them playing, sometimes twice a week and travelling a hell of a lot. How difficult is it to have them fully engaged with this so that they provide that experience for the fans?
Our players are very, very amenable. They're obviously under time constraints and pressures, and they play lots of games a season, 60 games a season between the middle of August and the middle of May, maybe. But you've got a player like Lucas Podolski, who, another piece we did Learning London with Lucas Podolski. We got him in a black cab and drove him around London for a couple of hours, filming it for our TV shows, a piece that went on the site. But he was tweeting as he went and posting pictures, etc., etc. And that created a buzz in itself. It wasn't really supposed to be a live event, but it turned into a live. That's just one of the examples of our players basically going with us in what we want to do and the way we want to contact and engage with our fans. So they're a pretty good bunch, I've got to say.
Well, if you've got them on board, then you're half the way there, I dare say. Good of you to talk to us, and good luck with the game against Liverpool this weekend.
Thanks very much. Cheers now.
Richard Clark there, Managing Editor at Arsenal Media Group, on the growing phenomenon of sports teams actually using social media as their main cut-through when it comes to building their supporter base and their brands.
And the thing is, it's about driving traffic and then, checking out their website. I mean, works on mobile, it's responsive design, all that kind of stuff. If you haven't checked out what Rich and the Arsenal guys are doing, I definitely suggest you do so.
Good on you, Sean. Where can people find you in the digital realm?
SportsGeekHQ.com, or if they just look up SportsGeek in iTunes.
It will be there. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, mate.
Need help with your content? Book in for a content brainstorming session with Sports Geek now. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/work.
Thanks again to Richard Clark from Arsenal Group for joining us on ABC Grandstand. I was hoping you were going to open with long-time listener, first-time caller. But again, great to have you on, and congratulations for reaching that 3 million follower milestone on Twitter. And if you haven't checked out what Rich is doing there at Arsenal, go to arsenal.com and check out some of the content that they're playing. There'll be some links in the show notes to some of the things that we discussed, like the slow motion video effect that they put out. So I hope to have Rich back on the show, maybe for a little bit of a longer chat later in the Premier League season. As mentioned on that Grandstand interview, I was in Perth catching up with the guys at the West Coast Eagles. They've been a client for a couple of years, so we were doing a little bit of review of 2013 and looking forward to 2014 and what we can do in digital and social over the next 12 to 18 months. So I was able to sit down with Matthew Jepp from the West Coast Eagles and discuss those plans for the podcast. So here it is. Very pleased to welcome from the West Coast Eagles. I've been working with him for a couple of years now. Matthew Jepp. Welcome, Matthew, to the Sports Geek podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Sean.
So first of all, just to introduce yourself to the Sports Geek podcast listeners, can you tell us a little bit about how long you've been at the Eagles and what your role is at the Eagles?
Sure. So my title is I am the coordinator for social and digital. So all the fun stuff that we've got around the football club to do. I've been here for nearly 3 years now. I was the first person in this role. They created it out of need, I would think.
Yeah, you can thank me anytime.
Yeah, I will. So Sean was laying the groundwork before I actually started here. So I was, like his first protege to look after when I first came on. So, we've done some good work together.
And so, in that time, the digital department from the Eagles' point of view has really, grown as it has with all the teams.
Yeah,
so what's the makeup of your digital team and the production at the Eagles?
It's all done through our communications department. And funnily enough, compared to some of the footy clubs, we've got a pretty small communications department. There's myself in charge of all the website and all the digital. We have another guy that's in charge of all multimedia. We've got a media liaison who's also now doubling as a multimedia guru as well. So we're going to have 2 camera guys, and we have a media liaison over in Melbourne. So dealing with the Melbourne press, obviously we're so far away, we need to kind of keep ourselves relevant, and that is Anna's job over there. Okay,
and thank you for providing us. I'm actually over at West Coast Eagles, and we're providing it. Recording this in, I think you termed it the dungeon. This is where you record a lot of your digital video and audio stuff.
It's exactly what it is. That's what we refer to it. The players know to it as that. It's the dungeon. It's where we record all the content for the club. We work out of Patterson Stadium, which is a blessing because we're right near the Oval, but it's also a negative because we've run out of space. So we've converted an old property storage closet.
So that's the smell?
That's the smell.
Yep.
Yeah, we haven't had the carpets cleaned yet. Into this recording studio, and we record all of the Eagle Vision, which is our TV program. All the player interviews are done in here. We record the podcast, so we fit 5 guys in here sometimes. And then just outside those doors is where the players will record all the challenges and all the games and stuff that we do for the website and for the TV show and bits like that. So yeah, all the content's filmed and recorded in here.
So you've got Eagles Vision, and we had a chat to Jonathan Bernard from Collingwood, and they've gone down the path of doing a TV show.
Yep.
You guys have Eagles Vision that runs on Channel 7 locally, and then you sort of follow the similar path of taking those pieces, because a lot of it's storytelling, featuring the players, featuring what they're doing out in the community, a bit of backstory. You want to tell us a little bit about Eagle Vision and sort of where that's positioned in what you guys are doing?
Well, Eagle Vision, so it's syndicated on the 7 network and on GWN, so it reaches the entire state. It's a half-an-hour program that normally runs prior to a West Coast game on the weekend, so it ties in well with, obviously what they're showing. And as you said, it tells the story from inside the footy club. Now, not like the club and the hangar do in terms of the other kind of football-orientated programs we've seen. We kind of, tell the stories about the guys going out to school. They show us what's in their fridge. We do a tour of their house, catch up with their pets. It's a kind of light-hearted look that, it's different than your football game on the weekend. It's a side of the guys that you probably never normally get to see. So we like to highlight that. They're normally pretty good blokes, most of them. So we like to give them a bit of airtime and let people get to know them, especially the fans that are living up in Broome and the Kimberley and stuff like that can't get down to a game and go to training and meet these guys. This is probably the best chance they've got, apart from jumping on Twitter, to converse with the guys.
Yeah, and I guess it's useful to point out for the people who are listening overseas, just the vast size of Western Australia. We'll put it in the show notes, but Perth is at the bottom corner of Western Australia, and it pretty much is a third of Australia, and it's very vast in spread out as far as the population goes. But for a long while, you were Western Australia's only AFL team. Yep. The Dockers have since come on to also compete in the space. Yeah. So from a digital point of view and some of the content that you're putting out, you mentioned there that obviously the players are getting engaged on social. How do you try to leverage what they're doing and sort of keeping them in line, but also using their content and what you're trying to do? Keeping them in line is always fun. I always look at it and I talk to people about it as, think about if you've got a younger brother. I know I do. I've got one who's 21 years old. The way that he uses social media to the way that I use social media is very different. And these guys are in the same age demographic. Most of them, some of the guys are a little bit older and they don't use it at all. But with the young guys, for us, it's all about education. The more they know about it and the more that they know the dangers and the pros and cons of social media, the better users of it they're going to be. So, we try and educate them as often as possible. And if there's any changes, if these things can change, platforms can arise within a couple of weeks and you have to be across what it is, how it works and how you report on those kind of things. So keeping them up to date with everything that they're doing in terms of that. And then I encourage them to get on there and use it because it's good for them, it's good for the footy club and it's good for their brand. So, we've got Nick Nui, who's one of the great users of social media in the AFL. He's 41,000 Instagram followers and however many thousand Twitter followers. For him, it's great for the footy club, showing him what he's been doing in the off-season. Obviously he's been injured last year, copped a bit of stick, but has been able to illustrate to his fans the work that he's putting in the pre-season. That's just good for the footy club, so we encourage things like that. Yeah, I did notice even in the paper yesterday, effectively three Instagram photos from Nick Nui and a couple of tweets became a page 3 article. So just shows the intense focus that all your boys are under as far as understanding that social is effectively another media platform and anything that they say can and will be used against them in the court of public opinion, I guess. And it will be here, especially we're a one-papered town pretty much. And it can get a little bit of slow news with only 2 footy teams in there. So if they've got a chance to write about anything footy related, if the boys have got a comment on a game or an umpiring decision or something like that, it will make it into the press over here. And that's something that the boys have become very adept at understanding, that anything that they write, they may as well be writing straight to a journalist. So, and there's been learning, curves in that as well. I'm sure there is at all organisations. But, I'm happy to say I think I feel a lot safer with the boys using social media now than I did when I first started. Yeah, definitely. Because they're learning all the time. What I wanted to touch on is you follow a similar lead to what I do in heading over to the US and investigating what teams are doing over there. So I've been on a few Sports Geek trips and caught up with teams to sort of see what they're doing, because you can only study so much from afar. You can study everything from the internet, but there's also a bit of actually meeting people and seeing what they do on the ground floor. Can you've been over the States a couple of times now. Can you give us a bit of insight on what some of the things that you've found out and learnt from those visits? Sure. Well, as you say, Perth, the most isolated city in the whole entire world, so trying to learn what's going on, keep your finger on the pulse can be pretty hard from your computer screen. So I've been lucky enough
the Eagles have sent me off on a couple of fact-finding missions to find out about who are the best users of social media, and I lobbed in New York last year in October about this time, and spent 6 weeks there touring around with the different sports teams and organisations, so meeting with the Jets, the Giants. Baseball was finished, so I couldn't do that. Meeting with the Rangers, going and experiencing game days over there. I found that to be one of the most, enlightening experiences that I had, just to see about all the activation and different things they've got going in the game. Obviously, their sport differs a little bit to ours in terms of it's a little bit more stop-start, timeouts, especially with the NFL where they break for a play and come back. So there's a lot of things that I took from what they were doing at MetLife Stadium, using the screens, using sound, using cheerleaders, all that kind of thing that I think we could come back and roll out into an Australian market. It's also great just to sit down, and I sat with the guys at the Miami Heat, and they're the NBA champions the year before, and to listen to them tell me that they have the same kind of battles getting access to the basketball department that we do here, getting access to the footy department made me a big sigh of relief, because they were facing the same challenges, and here they are. They're still trying to figure out whether they need a full digital sponsor or whether they're going to break it down. It made me feel a lot better about what we were doing over this side of the world. We weren't so far behind the 8 ball. And at the same time, it also gave me the opportunity to go and attend a few conferences and things like that and hear the social guys from ESPN speak. I took a big thing about second screen applications for, companions while watching sport. I think that's going to be a big market, especially over here, over the next few years. And those guys are already well, ahead of the curve into what you should be doing and how you go about it. So I learned a heap.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree from a game day point of view. I think Australia and the Australian market does membership and ticketing, exceptionally, and I think is world leaders, especially in the AFL scene in selling that membership message. But I do think game day activations and really connecting with the fans on game day, and then also tying digital to that is something that's really key. So we've spent a couple of days here at Patterson's talking about 2014 and trying to really, tick that box of game day. Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the plans you've got around what you're terming the nest and how you can sort of connect digital with game day? And give us a bit of insight into the West Coast Eagles demographic. So you've got a full stadium.
That's it. I think that's the important thing to understand about our situation here at the Eagles is we're different to a few of the other teams. Is we've got limited infrastructure in terms of the stadium can only fit 40,000 people, and we have 60 in a region of 67,000 full members at some point, and a wait list of 7,500. So to begin with, we've got a different audience that we need to cater. So yes, we need to cater to everybody that's sitting in the stands. At the same time, we need to cater to all the people that can't get into the stands. And you talk about demographics of our user base and our membership. It's quite an old demographic. These people have held on their tickets for years and years and years and years, and they never let them go. So you've got to serve that market, and at the same time, you've got to serve the school kids that still love their footy, play their footy every weekend, but can't go to a game at the moment because there's not a seat available for them. So you're serving two masters. So
over the last couple of years, we have done a lot of work to actually be serving those fans outside the stadium. One, because of the restrictions of the Wi-Fi, and the fans can't get access to it. But we also want to develop that relationship, because down the track there are plans for a new stadium, more capacity. And you don't want to lose that generation of fans that haven't made some connection. That's
completely right. I mean, that's really, it was one of my key focuses when I first took the position, was to engage these kids that can't get into the ground, but we still want them to have a relationship with the football club. They still love the Eagles. They've still got their favourite players. They just can't go to the game like their mates. So how do we make them feel like part of the football club?
So there's that. There's the developing of, I like the developing of FOMO, the fear of missing out. And you're really tweaking that with that younger demographic. But you've got we looked at the stats yesterday around the social media demographic and the fan base for the Eagles, and it's very, it skews very young. 75% of all your fans are under 35 or something along those lines. But the graph on the other side, from the membership point of view, it goes the other way.
It does.
It's a very older demographic. So do you want to talk about, I guess, having that as a problem?
It is a problem.
Because for you as a social, doing social and digital, you've got a large core of your fan base aren't consuming this content you're producing.
I know, and it's, we've got to work on bridging the gap I do. It's got to be one of the things that is our focus. Is are we serving those members, and are we educating the older members about the new ways to go and get this information? Obviously, they all pretty competent receiving emails. We have a great hit rate on opening, email blasts. But are they then going and consuming that content? Do we need to teach them how to go about consuming that content? That's a big challenge. These are people. Think about it like your mum and dad's. I have enough trouble trying to get my mum to use an iPad. Think about that mentality and applying it to that whole heap of...
And so is that where you sort of see the Nest kick coming in to sort of give a visual face and a
that's exactly
presence?
Right. Giving digital a face is what we're about on match days now. So we're going to have a few different bits of activation. You talk about the Nest, which will be like a match day pre-game centre where we're going to have a few iPads so people can come. We'll teach them how to follow West Coast on Facebook, how to jump on Twitter. We're going to have a few photo booths pushing photos straight to their social platforms and our social platforms. We'll have a few players there and it's just going to be a one spot, a hub for people that come to the game a little bit early and, want to meet players and actively support the footy club on game day. We're just going to give them another way to do it, and hopefully by giving it that presence, it becomes a little bit more prevalent in how they go about consuming media from then on forward. So it's like an education session almost.
It is, so we did talk about doing, and I really think that is important to always be training your fans. Definitely. And especially different demographics. So we've effectively broken down the segments, for you, and rather looking at the big number, and we can all look at the big number, but you really need to break it down. And so we are going to be focusing on how can we grow that plus 40 fan base from a Facebook point of view.
Yep.
I guess one of the things we're going to use in doing that is to try to engage them with the swoop, which we've had for a couple of years now, which is digital cheer squad, social media frequent flyer system. But what we did find when we first launched it, when it was the balance between Facebook and Twitter wasn't quite there.
Yep.
It was a really good way to convert Facebook fans to Twitter to get them to understand what Twitter is. So we're going to really just effectively change the focus of that and effectively try to hit those new fans. And what we were talking about yesterday with the guys at Fan Development is to help connect that older demographic with their, teenage sons or nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and sort of say, well, there's something that you can connect those generations a little bit, that they're both following West Coast Eagles on Facebook and they've both seen that photo on Instagram, those kind of things.
I think you've hit the nail on the head where you say like that's how you get those older family members involved, and that's how it happens in a household anyway. I was talking before about having my mum out with an iPad. Well, that's because I've gone and educated her on how to use it. So if we can get the kids educating the folks over something that they're all very interested in, I think that's the best way of going about it. So as you say, plans to get kids tagging their mum and dad who are on Facebook. I know parents are on Facebook everywhere these days.
Yeah, and it is a growing, like I do joke about it, but they're called the Silver Surfers, that older generation on Facebook, because they are on there. They're there to keep up to date with their kids and their grandkids' photos that are getting posted. And reconnecting, which is what Facebook is there for.
Yep.
They're just not as brand savvy and sharing as much as that younger demographic.
I agree. I think you're right again in saying that mum and dad don't know how to go and look up the West Coast Eagles on Facebook. They know how to find their kid. And that's again a learning process that they're going through. I'm sure as we move on, everybody's going to become more adept at using those platforms because they've grown up with them. But as you say, we need to serve this market here and now. So coming up with strategies in which, it's not obtrusive if you had your kid tag you in a West Coast Eagles photo, especially if you're a West Coast Eagles fan.
But it's also I guess telling them of the content that you're producing. So it's part of that
getting it in front of them. It is
part of that demographic is they don't know what they don't know.
No.
And they don't know that you're producing this great content on digital. So we're not even talking from a social point of view, but Facebook and to a lesser extent Twitter is a broadcast channel for the Eagles.
Oh, no doubt.
So what we're looking to do, and I think one of the things that's Fabian, you said you've already got their email address and you're communicating in that way.
Yep.
But if you can increase the amount of points of communication with that demographic, then you've gone from 27 emails during the season to 27 emails plus all the Facebook posts and all that, and just allows you to get that content because they don't know that they're missing
out. The more frequency that we can get that in front of them, then the more integrated it is into everything that we do, from a match day to to being in Eagle Vision to being on our web webisode to making sure we're answering questions in the podcast. All creating that full strategy where it's integrating across everything, and we're talking about putting Twitter handles and Facebook things on media backdrops and whatnot now, and make sure the website's very prevalent. I think, as you say, the more we get it in front of them and the more that they see it, it becomes less scary. And then the more uptake that you're going to have. I think it's scary to a lot of the older people that, like getting onto Twitter and following the West Coast, getting onto Twitter to begin with, especially in Perth. We talk about it being the most isolated city in the world. The East Coast started picking up Twitter probably a year and a half earlier than it started taking off here. It's only really now taking off here.
Yeah, but even from the studies that we did with the Swoop, we did find that once fans signed up, they followed the Eagles, they followed Rick the mascot, and then they followed all the players. They were quite happy. They effectively had a West Coast Eagles branded Twitter. Every time they opened up Twitter, it was all up to date with it. And so a lot of those will be consumers of your content. Yep. They won't engage. They won't retweet or use hashtags and those kind of things. But it's a means for them to get the data. Yeah,
and like gamifying fan engagement, like we did with Digital Cheer Squad, the Swoop. It was surprising that there it was sitting on a traditional media backdrop was hosted on the website, and so these older generations that still check the website for news started to see this platform that was on a website, something they could understand, and by the time they clicked it, they're going to start learning about Twitter and Facebook, and we might be the reason that they've gone and got onto that, which is great. Now as you say, they've got a West Coast branded news feed and timeline because we've directed them to go and follow, and they get all their info. So then they're learning, and they keep, and it evolves from there, and they're watching videos on YouTube, and they're posting it to their son's Facebook page. This is the utopian world that we're hoping for.
Yeah, that's what you want. You're talking very much like Zuckerberg now. So I guess the final thing is that you've built up an audience. You've got a really avid fan base that are consuming what you want. Yep. I think the next thing that comes down the pipe is how do you go about monetizing this? How do you get money out of this? And this is something we've been workshopping the last couple of days here about how to help the commercial team, put these proposals together. Yeah. That's still a work in progress.
I think it will be for quite some time. I don't think anyone in the world has the formula or the exact price guide where you go, hey, that's how much a Facebook post should sell for. And I think it's, I think we're learning about it as well. Like, we've gone from just kind of like shopping out Facebook posts where it's just an ad to getting it integrated into something that we do within the football club, so it's not just such a hard sell. I think that's the key for us, is getting it integrated and then figuring out how much each property's worth.
So I think some of the things that we did in the when we were workshopping it yesterday was really looking at what a property is. So we use the podcast as an example. Sure. It's a 22 to 28 minute podcast that has some ads in it for your properties. Yeah. But we were sort of saying, well, what could we sell that as a sponsorship to a sponsor? And first of all, you need to find a sponsor that wants to be in that space.
Correct. They need to be forward thinking in terms of that.
But they want to be active in a social sense and those kind of things. Yep. But what I sort of find, when breaking those kind of things down, some people in the commercial sense will just look at that product and that's it, and they won't value the promotion that you will give it. So when we broke it down, it was like, oh well, this is going to be put on a Facebook post every week. Yeah. So that's 25 Facebook posts. That's going to be tweeted multiple times by the team account. Yep. The players who are on it are going to tweet about it, which has a far higher engagement with the fans than anything else. So when we broke it down to that, you end up well, there is the value of the promotion of the product itself does have value as well as the product in its entirety.
I completely agree.
I guess that's part of that is educating the sponsors and the commercial teams, I guess, of the world, not just the Eagles, of pitching that as a product in its own right, but making sure that there is value for them. So if we can do something that gets a partner for the podcast, but then we can do something that gets a call to action, whether it's turning up to a store, running an event at a store. So there's multiple things you can pivot off a particular piece of content or a game day activation that you want to integrate it across all all things that you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I mean, the podcast is an interesting one. We ran it last year with no sponsorship, just to make it a medium and make sure we could do it properly and it sounded all right and things like that. And by the 24th out, we kind of had it down pat, but we weren't selling any space. We were only advertising our own properties. And as you say, it comes to the realisation of, well, they're not just going out to the 1,500 people that download the podcast a week. That's also going to go out to the 30,000 active Facebook users that we've got, and all pretty much anyone that's on Twitter as well. And you've helped me, open your eyes up to realise that you've got a much bigger reach than just the 1,500 that download that podcast. They're going to see it everywhere else, and if you integrate it properly, then you're looking at, instead of 1,500, you're looking at 80,000 people that are going to go and see that post, and then being able to articulate that. I think that's the important part about it.
So I mean, that's some of the stuff that we've been working on over the last couple of days. So again, thank you for having me out here.
Thanks for coming.
Look forward to the next season. You got any trips planned heading over the States?
I'm only going. There's no fact finding. It's purely leisure. I'm going to escape the heat of Perth. It's already 35 degrees here today. I'll go to the States for 4 weeks. Probably catch some basketball, a little bit of football, cooler weather.
So you are an NBA fan. I did see you firing up a league pass earlier today with the season.
We're a day away now.
A day away when we're recording this. Yeah. So you just for the podcast, give us some predictions for the NBA season coming up.
Brooklyn Nets, PG. Paul Pierce, KG coming across. If Kid can get them all playing together, I think they're going to be a really, really nasty-looking outfit. I'm the same with the Bulls as well, though. The Bulls look good. Rose is back. Noah can kind of drift back and not be the main point guy this time. And then Clippers for total dominance over the Lakers this season. I'm going to go to the Clippers-Lakers game in early January at Staples. I'll be wearing my Clippers jersey and just reveling in the fact that I reckon the Lakers might struggle this year. So that's that.
All right. Well, hopefully my scar brother Kobe Bryant's at least on the court when you're there. So thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks again to Matt Jepp from the West Coast Eagles for that chat, and it was good spending a couple of days over in Perth, although the moving to the other side of the country does mess with the old body and the old body clock with the different time zones. I actually started the day the Sunday heading out to Perth with the Warriors Live Google Hangout at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I finished up in Western Australia. I think it would have been 2 a.m. my time. So it was a long day, but a couple of fruitful days over at West Coast. Just my key takeaway from the stuff that we did was really to be aware of targeting content for your audience. And that little clicker is my reminder to say, well, let's hurry up and get this show over. As I mentioned there, I have to dedicate episode 24 to my scar brother, Kobe Bryant, making his return from Achilles. Hopefully we'll see him on the court very soon. And absolutely loving the fact that he's taken the fans on the journey from a social media point of view. So this one's to you, Kobe, and hope to see you on the floor very, very soon. Also, just to finish up, I've got a new idea for another segment for the podcast, and I want to call it Social Media Post of the Week, and that's pretty much I have to give a hat tip to Lee Ellis, the Aussie on the Starters podcast, who does a tweet of the week looking at the NBA. So this one is really Social Media Post of the Week. So if you see a sports team or an athlete, anything that's in the sports social media space, put out a post, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Vine, and it can be a fan engagement post, it can be a sponsor activation post. You think it's good work, send it, and I'd love to have your nominations. Send me a tweet at Sean Callanan or Sports Geek with some nominations, and I'll share one each week. This week, I'm going to give it to FC Augsburg, which are a football team out of Germany. I did not understand this post, but they somehow worked a puppet video into Facebook. So I'm definitely giving it to this week. And in the show notes, if you go to sportsgeekhq.com/24, I will have a link. I'll have that Facebook post embedded in the show notes. I want to see more sports teams using puppets in their video work. This week's Sounds of the Game, and that noise, again, I'm just doing these things now to remind me to do these segments, is the Sounds of the Game segment. This thanks to Daniel Pinney from the Melbourne Storm, who was lucky enough to go to the Melbourne Cup, which is effectively Australia's Kentucky Derby. And here's what he grabbed at Melbourne Cup Day.
Pluckybell raced up to Arenosa, and they're clear to Golden Penny. It's Pluckybell on the outside, getting the upper hand from Arenosa. Drew a half in front, and Pluckybell drew away and beat Arenosa.
It has been a big week in Melbourne. Cup week always is, and I hope to catch up with some of the digital team behind Melbourne Cup and Cup Week. They had 100,000 people turn up to the course to attend and cheer on horses. If you didn't know, we actually have a public holiday here in Melbourne for a horse race. That's how sports mad we are in Melbourne. That wraps up another episode of Sports Geek Podcast. As I've said before, you can get the show notes at sportsgeekhq.com/24. If you could share that on your LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, any platform that allows you to share links. Obviously not Instagram, because it's just photos. You can find Sports Geek on iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, and now I'm starting to upload the back catalogue up to SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/sportsgeek. If you've got any suggestions, any feedback, if you've got a Sounds of the Game audio clip, please send me an email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. And now here's my closing 2 cents. Don't forget, every post is a chance to deliver your digital strategy.
Find all Sports Geek podcasts at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP. Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Like the Sports Geek podcast? Find us on facebook.com/sportsgeek. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast. Check out which teams work with Sports Geek at sportsgeekhq.com/clients.